Welcome to this Global Village Media production, and thank you for spending time with us this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, depending on your neck of the woods. Now, today's conversation is titled Connection is Care, the Hidden Health Cost of Loneliness. And we're tackling something that many people actually feel, but they don't always have the words for. Now, loneliness it's not just an emotion. It's not just an emotion, it's a biological footprint that shapes our stress levels, it shapes our sleep, it shapes our immunity, it shapes our mood. And even that, it affects families, it affects workplaces, schools, and neighborhoods, which are, the very fabric of community life. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring the biosocial implications of loneliness, what it does to us internally, and what it changes in the way that we relate to one another. We'll also explore practical strategies, how people of all ages can rebuild healthy in-person connection and create communities where belonging isn't accidental but intentional. And because our guest today is joining us from the United States, while many of our listeners might be over here in the UK or other places around the world, we are going to be drawing our insights that translate across the globe. I'm your host today, Charles Olorunfemi, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Lisa Dunne. Good afternoon, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Charles. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you very much. Now, let me just quickly give you a brief, proper introduction. Now, Dr. Lisa is an award-winning educator, author, and speaker with a PhD in human development and advanced training in communication studies and human and organizational systems, which makes her uniquely placed to help us understand loneliness, not only as a personal experience, but as a systems issue that touches every stage of life. Much of her work centers around how people, especially younger folks, how they build relational resilience, communicate well, and thrive with healthy communities. Dr. Lisa, you're welcome, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us on this conversation about connection is care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me start off by saying this. When you hear the word loneliness, what do most people misunderstand about what it really is?
I think there's a connotation around it that sounds more like the synonym pathetic than what it really is, which is disconnected. And so there's a sensation, almost a stigma around the concept. I think that in the last decade, we've done a great job of bringing it more to the surface. Certainly in England, you led the way with that. You were the first country I'm aware of that appointed a minister of loneliness. I read about that in grad school. But I think there's been a stigma attached, and I think we've misunderstood the context. It's not as you said earlier, it is biosocial, it is biological, sociological, physiological, a state of being. But the great news is that it's not an assessment that doesn't have a cure. It has a cure, and we have agency and power to change that in our lives.
Good. And we're so glad it does have a cure because it's something that is affecting a whole lot of folks all over the place. So now, from a human development perspective, what happens to us biologically and psychologically when when it becomes quite chronic?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's really important that we as humans understand our biology. And that's because our biology really tells a story about how we're to interact with one another. It gives us answers to the problems that we face as humans. And so when we miss that, what's happening under the surface of the skin, we miss sometimes the remedies for our crises. And one of the things that we see on both sides, when you have great community, we see lower cortisol levels, the stress hormone is lower, we see better longevity, even a faster healing from diseases, we see lower blood pressure, better mood regulation, and the reverse is also true. The biological perspectives are more stress, higher stress hormones, slower healing of disease, higher blood pressure. All these indicators are telling us that we need community, even psychologically, lower stress. When you have community, lower anxiety, lower depression. In our country, Gen Zs are called the most anxious, depressed, suicide ideation prone generation in the history of our 250 years as a nation. And so we know that this connectedness is playing a significant role. Less anxiety, better emotion regulation when you have a connected social circle. So the both of those, we see high levels when you're connected and low levels when you're disconnected. That's a pattern in the sciences and the social sciences that tells us there's agency, there's ability, there's efficacy there.
Right, right. Oh, good. Thanks for that insight. Is there a particular reason why those numbers for Gen Z are so high?
I think Gen Zs have struggled with a lot of issues. One, they've been exposed to world problems at a level that no other generation has seen before they had any agency
Okay,
to do anything. And
okay,
in my work with Gen Zs, I have a university and I've worked with Gen Zs for many years, but
yeah,
both the youngest generations for many years. But they feel powerless to solve many of the world's problems, and so there's kind of this sense of helplessness. They've been exposed to it. Many of them have become desensitized, and then their social time in our country, 64% of their social time is spent on a screen. And
yeah,
so they lose that interpersonal warmth and connectivity that comes from
yeah.
having a relationship, a face-to-face relationship. And so they literally don't, they also have very unrealistic expectations, living in a social media culture where highlight reels are the main fodder. They've missed out on what's real. They don't have a lot of intergenerational mentorship connections, which is something I push all the time in our
Yeah,
school
yeah.
models and in our connections with other churches and organizations that
Mm-hmm.
that we need somebody older than us, 15 to 20 years, and somebody younger than us, and we need to be receiving and pouring in, and that really connects us to something,
Yeah.
greater than ourselves. But it helps us to alleviate some of the problems that are in our own generational bubble, and a lot of Gen Zs have lived in that bubble.
Well. That's a great exposure. Thank you for that, Dr. Lisa. And you've touched on that kind of what I wanted to ask next. Because the next question I was going to say that, so how does loneliness show up differently across lifespan, including children, teenagers, working age adults, and then even older adults? So you've touched on that already, haven't you, with the younger people? If you can still please share some more light on that, how it shows up across lifespan.
Sure. And when we look at kids, kids are, typically, if they haven't had a lot of trauma, they're more resilient. They're resistant to some of the things that might break us as
Yeah.
teenagers or young adults if we haven't had a lot of resilience built
Mhm,
into us.
mhm,
But they're joyful and they're excited. And so loneliness in a young child is probably they've learned some kind of social behavior and no one has addressed or corrected that. And so they're continuing to do things that drive other children away. And so that might look like anger. The young kids might be angry all the time.
mhm,
They might be aggressive because they need a connection. I'm fascinated with human attachment. We have an attachment crisis in the United
mhm,
States right now. When we
mhm,
look at young children and they're showing anger because they're not attached to a primary caregiver, or that caregiver's attached to, his or her phone instead of the human
mhm,
connection. And so there's a lot of anger
mhm.
in the younger
Wow.
generations as a result. As an older person, a young adult, or even a middle-aged adult, you might see a lot of busyness, frantic behavior, connected to things and feeling
Yeah.
like you're going, but it's not meaningful. It's not
Mm,
connected
mm,
work. It's not
mm, mm,
value-centric work. It's just busy work. And a lot
mm.
of times as adults, we do that to distract ourselves from real
Yeah,
emotions rather than processing through what we've really experienced and looking
yeah.
for ways to heal. And then as older adults, sadly, that's where we see, the reluctance, the giving up, even when we look at well-known Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, up in that later life, those years of stagnation, if
Mhm,
we're not connected, we feel stagnant and we feel disconnected, and it really shows up as people who are shut in and maybe they just watch TV all day, or
yeah.
they have no social circle, no. So we want to
Mm.
build those social circles when we're younger. Work
Yes,
can
yes,
wait.
yeah,
We
yeah.
just welcomed our first grandchild. And
Oh.
so, you're that all the things that we did
Mm,
with our children, and you kind of looking back, think, I wish I had
mhm,
slowed down with so many
mm,
things because
mm,
it
mm,
goes so fast. And so, creating that connectedness, thank God we have connectedness with our children.
mhm,
But I know a lot of parents didn't have that. And so,
yeah,
start
yeah,
over. If
yeah.
your adult children don't talk to you, start over, ask for
Mm,
forgiveness, make it right. Begin again, because we need those circles of connection for
yeah,
mental health or physical health throughout the lifespan.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And congratulations
Thank
on
you.
on your grandchild. So, and you mentioned disconnected there. You touched on disconnection already. What are the most common life transitions or social conditions that tip people from busy into disconnected?
That is such a powerful question.
Yeah.
I think
Mm, mm.
the word busy has been a badge in our
Yes.
generation, a
Mm,
badge of honor.
mhm,
I'm busy. That means I'm doing something. You're doing something, Henry David Thoreau said,
mhm,
answer
mm,
busy.
mm,
You're doing
mm.
something. Is it meaningful work? Is it
Yeah.
something, again, to distract you from what's
Mm,
real,
mm,
from what
mm,
you really need to experience? And so
mm, mm.
I think we need to look at our busyness and make sure that it's leading to something meaningful. That
Yeah.
that tipping point between, what are we busy about? What are we busy doing? The time is the coin of our life, is the old saying. Beware how you spend it. How are
Mm,
we
mm,
spending our days? How are we spending our hours? And is that
yeah.
leading to something that's going to be meaningful and
Yeah.
connected on the other side? Or is it just going to leave us more frustrated because we
Yeah.
wasted
Yeah.
our time on some worthless endeavor at the end of the
Mm.
day?
Yeah, yeah. But is there a way? I mean, what would you advise people? Maybe how to prioritize their business? Anything that you can share about that?
Well, prioritizing, even
Yeah.
Covey's Seven Habits. I mean, he talks
Mm,
about the
mm,
the burners, where are things on the front burner, the back burner, moving things up so that you've got a circle
mm,
of agency, concern, that your ability is focused on things that are meaningful. For example, I just wrote my seventh book, and
mm,
in
mm.
writing a book, you have to give time every single day to
Yeah.
writing, or every other day. You have to be reasonable. But if you don't have a little sense of urgency with that, the book's never going to get done. I have many friends that are still working on their dissertation 5 years later, because it's easy to get lost in the
Yeah,
research and not
definitely,
finish the
definitely.
task. So
Yeah.
how do we move that forward? That is, time management is self-management. We say in college all the time, you have 24 hours, I have 24 hours. How are we
Yeah,
gonna how
yeah,
are we gonna
yeah.
steward and utilize those 24 hours,
Mm, mm.
for the sake of whatever it is that we're aiming toward?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So still talking about the younger the Gen Z folks, because obviously you're known for a lot of work with that. Is there anything else in addition to what you've probably said already that is uniquely driving loneliness among younger people?
Yes, I think the lack
Mm,
of relational resilience is a significant
mm,
key.
mm,
The
mm,
ghosting phenomenon, which I know is
mm.
global,
Yes, it is.
is, a person has they
Yeah.
have an issue, and instead of responding, they just
Mm,
disappear. They just withdraw. Now, relationships are built on give and take. They're built on, rising and falling. And I
mm,
encourage, in our school, we do a lot of work with NAP stages of relationships. He was a,
mhm,
a professor in Texas, and he did this beautiful formula that friendships, there are predictive patterns of behavior to keep your friendship. For example, self-disclosure. If you never share anything authentic about yourself, your relationship will never go deeper. It will never expand. It will never really connect unless you
mhm.
authentically share. And that's not sharing highlight reel. That's sharing really what's going on. There's
Yeah.
no bonding without that. And going back to our biology, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, we see this released when we share something that is vulnerable, not a highlight
Mm,
reel, but something vulnerable. That's when people
vulnerable.
trust and
Yeah.
connect. And
Yeah.
so there are patterns, formulaic patterns. And I think because we live in an instant culture, everything's fast paced. If the order can't get there by tomorrow, I'm not going to order it, whatever. We've lost that patience. George Washington, who was our first president in the United States, came from England. He's technically British.
Mhm,
He said that friendship is a plant of slow growth, and it must undergo and withstand the
mm,
shocks of
mm,
adversity before it's worthy of the name. It takes
mm,
time for the roots to go down. And I think we haven't really modeled that well in older generations. I don't think we've modeled marriage well. I don't think we've modeled friendship well. And so I think that, this generation is really learning it for the first time. So having
mm.
those authentic conversations with your kids,
Yeah.
making sure they understand how to resolve conflict in a positive and healthy way. And
Mm.
avoidance is not the positive. Ghosting is not the positive, healthy way. We need to have those honest conversations
Yeah,
that
yeah.
lead to resolve. And
Mm,
that's humility. They have to come in
mm,
humility. There's always two sides to every story. Coming in humility, working for the betterment of the relationship and the goal. And that's been, that's not significant. That's not only younger generations, but I really see it
yeah.
significantly in our Gen Zs right now, the ghosting phenomenon. So confrontation, make it healthy, work to build bridges.
Yeah, yeah. I like that word that you used, relational resilience. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a cool word. No, but really, just in a nutshell, just explain that, just really briefly, because I'd like that to resonate. That word. Yeah, I think it's really
Yeah,
key to what you just said.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Relational
Mm,
resilience,
mm,
it's looking at there's a plateau when we look at relationships. It's a
Mm,
between individuation and
mm,
differentiation. Individuation
mhm,
is me, and
mm,
differentiation. I'm a me, but I'm
mhm,
also a
mhm.
we in a
Yes.
relationship. I've been married 35 years. My family, my mom and dad divorced 7 different people
Mm,
before I was an adult, and so
yes.
we did not have that modeled in our family, but we got around people who mentored us, who modeled it really well,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
gave
yeah.
us a pattern. And so when you look at that plateau in NAP stages of development, relational development, you
Mm,
see that there's a balance. You've got to have this strong dialectical tension between me and we. So you've got to be an I, but you also
yeah,
have to be a we. And so
yeah.
we miss that a lot of times. If we're too much I,
Mm,
we're too
mhm,
strong.
mhm.
That's definitely the American way. Very strong,
Yeah, yeah,
individualistic. Then we miss the we connectedness. If there's too much we connectedness, you don't have a sense of self that's separate, then there's a
yeah,
lack of
yeah, yeah,
emotional and relational
yeah.
health as well. So relational
Okay.
resilience is coming
Mm,
back to that plateau every time, forgiving every
mm,
day, 7 times a day, 700 times a day, whatever, forgiving,
mhm, mhm.
walking in authenticity, having mentors speaking into our lives, having a desire to want to make a relationship work, that
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
just you got to have so many young marrieds. My husband and I do young married counseling at our church, and so many people come into their relationship thinking, oh no, we had a fight, our relationship is over, we had an argument. No, everybody has arguments.
Yeah,
Any
yeah,
two people who have
yeah,
an I, you have an individuation,
yeah,
you're going to
yeah,
have differences of opinion. It's how
yeah.
did you deal with that? How did you overcome that? How did that
Mm.
make you stronger in your relationship? That's relational resilience.
Yeah,
When you're
yeah,
building muscle, if I'm doing push-ups, I'm building muscle. And if I don't do that, if I stop doing that, my
mm.
muscles are going to atrophy.
Mhm,
And it's
mhm,
the same
mhm.
with the relationship. We've got to keep pushing against that, against those barriers, against those walls until we grow as a we, as in addition to growing as an I.
Yeah, yeah. So balance is very, very important. Yeah, balance. Thank you so much for that insight. Now, so how do people, again, especially young people, but and older folks, how do they rebuild confidence and skills for healthy in-person relationships, not just digital relationships, but real relationships?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we need community. And
Mm,
so it used to be in both of our countries that there were central points of community. And of course, when you're younger, you might have
mm,
school community. But
mm,
as you get older, it's like if you played up, college sports in our country and then you graduate, if you don't keep playing sports or working out, you're going to feel it, right? And so you have to kind of create these intentional communities now that used
mm.
to be very natural. They used to be part
Yeah,
of our
yeah.
our countries in England. My husband's from England, obviously, as I shared with you. And I remember
Mhm,
just standing in England the first time we met and looking around. There were little churches in every village that were once a center point of community and connectedness. And because now many of those are coffee shops, that's a different kind of connection. Liking the same coffee
mhm,
as someone else does is not the same level of connectedness to you want to make an impact in the world. You want to, teach other people value and character. That's a really different motivation. And so I think we've lost a connectivity. We've lost an anchor, a mooring to something that's a lot bigger than ourselves. And so now we have to be intentional about that. We have to look for opportunities to connect, but we need to find things that are not just a coffee. It needs to be something deeper, that connects us. But that really is our first step,
okay.
finding those positive environments that are going to connect us to something greater.
Mhm, mhm. And in addition, is there any other factors that have intensified loneliness, maybe over the years, maybe in over in the US particularly, or over here in the UK? Additional factors that I know you've spoken about a few already, but
Yeah, I know we blame online a lot. Obviously, online
mm,
connectivity is,
mm,
if there's a
mm, mm,
vacuum, something is going to fill it. So obviously,
mm,
it's filling a vacuum. Right now, what I'm speaking on across the US is what we're seeing in artificial connection. So we're seeing a rise of in Gen Z specific cultures, 70% of Gen Z's Associated Press say have a relational connectedness to a chatbot, not informational. That's different. You're getting information like a dictionary, but relational, where they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel connected, they feel unconditionally loved
mm.
from an artificial intelligence. Something is
Wow.
wrong. That's a vacuum, right? There's been a
Yeah.
vacuum of leadership.
yeah.
So then we have to go back to see, okay, parents, what did you do? Did you attach to your children? Did you connect to your children? Do they feel believed? Do they feel like they belong as something bigger than themselves? We're all forged in the crucible called family. It all starts there. So, be looking at those, where do we have agency? If you're a grown up, you have to now forgive, move on, and don't do the same pattern. Like we had to say,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
going to marry 7 people. I'm not going to have the same pattern that, I grew up with, but we have agency. And so I think that the online community has added to that, but I definitely think that this lack of attachment has been a critical crisis point where people they haven't felt believed in, they haven't had a strong sense of identity. Identity in Gen Zs and Alphas in our country has been under attack. Just kids do not know who they are. They don't have a sense of their giftedness, their talent, their value. And so they do dumb things because they don't know that they're valuable, And so, creating environments where our kids feel, and that's one reason I'm very passionate about homeschooling, which I know homeschooling is legal in England. I don't talk to a lot of people in England about it, but you have an act on the books 1996 that made
Yep,
it
yep.
legal. And one of the reasons I love it is because we homeschooled kindergarten to college, and kids have a one-to-one experience where somebody who knows them, loves them, believes in them can encourage them and tailor coursework to what their gifts and callings are, which is really what we did with our kids. And it's just so exciting. But it really fosters a deeper level of relationship. And of course, there are outliers, bad examples, but by and large, you see kids performing better in standardized testing, better emotional
Okay.
maturity, better connectedness, a better sense. And
Mm,
that's because it's an adult doing the mentoring. So if you get in a school environment where there's 35 kids and one
yeah,
teacher,
yeah.
there's not enough adult to go around, even if you're incredible as a teacher, and you're more likely to be peer oriented rather than parent oriented. So that means your heart is connected. You care more about what your peers think than your parents think. That's
Mm,
a relatively new social phenomenon. We started seeing that in the late 60s. James Coleman
okay.
was a researcher that pointed that out.
Mm,
So connectedness starting in our younger years, and then as we grow up, making sure that we're connected to other people. I think the social media crisis has been a bit has created a lot of blocks for people to feel authentic and to feel value. But I think also the family culture has needed I think it needs a little work so that we can turn out kids who feel like they have, a sense of value.
yeah, thanks. And I understand about the family. I know that's pretty important. But when the homeschooling, you're homeschooling, isn't that child missing out of that relationship that they are building with friends in the community, in the school community?
Well, it depends on what you mean by socializing. That was one
Mm,
of the big questions back in the early 90s, what you mean by
mm, mm,
socializing. And so
mm,
when you actually look at the life of a homeschooler, they are more connected to ages 5 to 95 than
mm.
any other peer group. And that's because they don't just sit in a living room and do school. Typically takes about 3 hours a day to do what the public school takes 8 hours in our system called public school.
Okay.
Takes the traditional school 8 hours a day. And that's because they're getting one-to-one tutoring. How it used to be in
Mm,
your country, how it used to be in my country, it was one-to-one tutoring. It was
okay.
relational. It was
Yeah.
the environment was very conducive to learning. And
Mm,
now we have, of course, these kind of mass industrialized educational systems in our country where it's like you're a cog in a machine, go in, get your learning, go out. And so there's not a lot of individualization. And
yeah, yeah.
we do need individualized learning.
Mm,
Most homeschoolers in our country are connected to co-ops, they're connected to sports, they're connected to nature, environments, they're doing things out
mhm.
in the community. And so we've started 36 homeschool academies where we help parents partner with local churches that are open during the week, and they do school together in a community where they've chosen, where it might be 5 kids in a room together. And
Mm,
there's just such incredible,
mm,
the two building blocks of intrinsic motivation are efficacy and wonder, the ability to do something, and curiosity. And
yeah.
so when you're just being fed data constantly all day long, you miss out a lot of times on the wonder. And so
Mm,
homeschooling is an opportunity to slow down, to savor the work, and to build that sense of efficacy and wonder. I know the show's not about homeschooling, but boy, it fits so well with development
yeah,
because it's such a
I understand.
critical.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the way you explained it, it sounds like more effective education than basic. But anyway, good point though. Thanks. So let's moving on. So what does belonging look like? Yeah, let's look at what does belonging look like in practice, and how is this different from simply being socially active?
Yeah. So We have when we look at culture, there's an author that said, he called it together but alone. When we look at our
Mm,
larger culture, and you could be at the mall, at the
mhm,
grocery store, at the gym, I could be
mm,
out here on the
mm,
trails in San
mm,
Diego, and we could be around a lot of people, but that doesn't mean we're connected to them. And
mm,
so being
mm,
socially active, I might be, I'm at a city meeting today, I'm at
yeah,
another meeting
yeah,
tomorrow, but that doesn't mean I'm connected. That doesn't
yeah,
mean I belong.
yeah.
Belonging is deeper, back to that first question that we talked
Mm,
about, which is that sense
mhm,
of connectedness is not just a coffee shop experience.
mm,
It's something that connects with my values, connects with my purpose. It connects me with
mm,
something that's greater than myself. And so to have that sense of belonging means that you have to find people or groups that have some core values that
yeah,
are the same as yours, that are similar to yours, enough
mm,
that you can inspire each other and encourage each other. And maybe that's you starting a group. Maybe there's
yeah,
nothing like that in your neighborhood, or
yeah,
maybe maybe you have a neighborhood group or a community group that you haven't checked out yet and you need to find that. Sometimes you're the visionary, sometimes you're the person, that's helping to build the vision for someone
yeah,
else. But
yeah, yeah,
looking for something that's really different, being socially active, that
mm,
goes back to just being busy. You're busy, but are you connected? Are you
mm,
doing something meaningful
mm,
work?
mm. And would it matter, Dr. Lisa, if that community is still digital, if it's an online, even though yeah, they're addressing, they've got core issues at the heart. Would it matter, or what would you think about that? Would it matter if it's still digital?
Well, there obviously
Mm,
there is a level of connectivity digitally.
mm,
Absolutely.
mm.
It's a supplement to human relationship.
It
It's
should be a
not a
supplement, yeah.
substitute. It
Okay.
doesn't replace face-to-face
Mm, mm, mm,
relationship. There's
mm,
a warmth, there's a connectivity in proximity that we miss digitally. But
mm,
there are
mm.
tremendous benefits to being
Yeah,
digitally connected.
gotcha.
I would say that you need to balance it out. When I look
Yeah.
at the
Mm,
social time, 64% of social time being screen time for Gen Zs, I would say that's too high. We need to bring that maybe down to 20 or 30%. And then we need to have human relationships fill in the gap, for the rest of that up to the 100%. But I think there's a place for it. Absolutely. I mean, it's wonderful. We have wonderful technology that connects us around the globe.
mm,
However,
mm.
it is not a replacement for face-to-face human relationships.
Thank you. So it shouldn't be a replacement. Thank you. So now, if you had to give listeners a simple blueprint for building healthy in-person community, what are the essential ingredients? I know you've mentioned a few before, haven't you? But any other essential ingredients that you would like to include?
Yeah, obviously, family is our first community,
Mm,
for better, for worse, right? We're forged there.
yeah.
The highest success rates we see in terms of organizational connectivity is those value-specific organizations like churches, places where you're connected around something bigger than yourself. Like in our country, we do a lot of work with voting. If we have 20% of people showed up for an election, obviously their voice wasn't, the voice of our city was not heard. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
whether that's my church or whether that's my local, local activist kind of organization, but something where we're helping. And I think a lot of people don't think about the idea that they have something in their hand right now. You have a skill set, you have a gift, you have a talent, you have compassion, you have empathy, you have a mercy gift, you have a building gift, there's something in your hand right now that could help someone else. And when we connect with somebody who has a need that we have the giftedness to fill, there's a sense of connectivity there that I think builds us up. It's human flourishing. It's
Yeah.
again connectivity. We've been, I think, living in silos for so long where we're just
Mm, mm,
individualized and
mm.
thinking about ourselves. There's a whole generation, the me generation,
Yeah.
where it was all about the one person. That's not our design. Go back to
Yeah.
the biology, go back to the psychology, go back to the sociology. That is not our design. Our design is to be wired for connection, to be wired for community. So finding those meaningful connections, but the ones with the highest value are shared value organizations like churches or some kind of group, activist group.
Yeah. Okay. Good. 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 Man should not be alone.
That is
All right.
right. That's
That's
right.
yeah. Now, mentorship is central to your work. So let's talk about mentorship and why is mentorship such a powerful antidote to loneliness and how can communities build it intentionally?
Yes, mentorship is so
Mm,
incredibly powerful. Again,
yeah.
we each of us has something in our hands
Mm,
that we can reach out,
mm,
receive for somebody 15 years older and pour
mm,
into somebody who's 15 years younger than us. And I think a lot of us have overlooked the idea of the school system being such a gold mine for mentorship. That's what we built our model from preschool to college on the mentorship model. So we have people who are like in our college system, they're practitioners in their field, but they understand how to tap not just the intellect, but also the heart, the head, and the heart to be able to connect with students. Parker Palmer, who was a master teacher, he always said, the familiar quote, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that rings true for every age. That's not just students, but that connectedness. And so mentorship is having someone who will speak truth, who will be authentic, who has gone before you. There's a lot of social science research to support the idea that we will become the sum total of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And so if you look around your social circle and everybody's negative and complaining or whinging, the British word, that you see a lot of that, then you guess what? Tag, you're gonna, that's bad company corrupts good character. We're gonna be the same. And so making sure we're aware of the social circle that we're surrounding ourselves with and filling ourselves with. And so mentorship is an answer to that. And I think scholastically, even if you have a traditional scholastic system, you can have mentors who are coming in and speaking to kids, reading to kids, encouraging kids, playing chess with kids, doing things to develop that, especially that intergenerational mentorship. We have segregated ages out in our scholastic system, in our churches. We just see age after age, just a barrier. And we need to see examples from a first grader who sees a fifth grader give a speech has a higher bar of expectation for his own capacity, right? If you're only surrounded by people who are just like you will never achieve and strive to something greater. So, right. So we want to surround ourselves with mentorship. I have great personal mentors who speak into my life, other college presidents that I respect. But I think the main idea when you're looking for a mentor is somebody who has good fruit in their life in that area, a good harvest. They have good good behavioral characteristics or whatever it is that you're looking for. And if they have that, then somehow they got that. They cultivated that in their life. And so mentorship gives you the opportunity to, to discover those steps to cultivation so that you can have the same harvest.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's really, really important. Thank you for that. And I hope that's really, really beneficial to some adults who will begin to a younger person and speak good things into their life, as you've been saying. So good, thank you for that. So let's talk about when loneliness actually becomes a serious health risk. So when does loneliness become a serious health risk? Then they need professional support. And what should someone do if they recognize this, maybe in themselves or in someone that they might know?
Yeah, I think, again, if you have a connected circle, then you'll have caring friends who know when something is wrong with you, when something is off. And, we have different personality characteristics. If you're a sanguine extrovert, then you probably need a lot of friends to feel connected. If you're more of an introvert personality, you might need 3. The average, right, I think Robin Dunbar an anthropologist did the study on. Most of us have about 5 friends. That's about normal. So, but if you have friends speaking into your life and they know when something is off, they should feel free to tell you, hey, you don't seem like yourself. If there's something wrong. And the same goes for us. If we see friends who seem down for extended periods of time, that could be depression. It could be purposelessness, like they don't have a sense of purpose or value. They're isolating themselves. Those are all precursors of something that loneliness could lead to, obviously depression. The latest science is that loneliness is the new smoking, that it's so dangerous for the human body. I'm sure you've already read that and talked about that, but it's getting help from somebody who has been there before, whether that's going right into professional care for that or starting to talk with a friend. There's so much cathartic response and release in talking with a friend, really sharing honestly with someone you trust, not just any friend, someone you trust, that you trust, again, the fruit in their life. And you're willing to share with them what's really going on. And when you do that, when you open yourself up, again, that bonding hormone oxytocin is released. There's a sense of connectivity. And sometimes it can be a simple barrier that's held us back. Unforgiveness is such a significant biological, sociological, spiritual barrier. When we walk in unforgiveness for things that have happened to us, it doesn't hurt the person. It only hurts us. It doesn't hurt the other person who committed the whatever it was against us, right? So those are, I think those are often underestimated, overlooked characteristics as well. But making sure that if we're seeing those signs of extended purposelessness. I mean, we all have bad days. If you have one bad day and but if you're in a fetal position for a week,
Mm,
something
mm.
might be wrong.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
ask an honest question. People who are around you say, "Hey, what do you see in me? What do you see in my life?
Mm,
Where am I off? Do you see a place in my life where I went off, when I went off course?" And help get yourself back on, because that's the great thing about neuroplasticity, about our own ability to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, that we literally have the capacity, the agency to change. We
mm.
don't have to be stuck in these these patterns of dysfunction for our whole lives.
Wow. That is quite deep, actually. It's very deep. Okay. And then to close off, to round up, what's the one action that you think listeners want to take this week to strengthen real life connection and community?
Yes, I think assess and address is first.
Mm,
Look at your own circle,
mm,
assess it. Where are you? Address it. So don't just stop there. It needs an action step. The book of Ecclesiastes says that two are better than one,
mm,
and it talks about when one falls down, the other can help him up. You might be the person who has fallen down and needs help up, but you're later on going to be the person who can give that help. And so wherever you are in life, whatever season you're in, first of all, it's just a season. It's not forever. No season
mhm,
lasts forever. But you might be the person who's reaching out, or you might be the person who's getting helped up. And that's really important, to have those people around you so that you can be the one helping or the one receiving help. That starts with an honest conversation. Hey, I need help.
mm,
Hey, I need to share something, whatever that is.
mm,
But assess and address, build that community. Look for communities that have shared value, things that you can really put your hand to. You can
mm,
make, meaningful contributions to your neighborhood, to your city, to your culture, to your country. And that comes with, those value connected organizations that are going to help you not just survive, but thrive.
mm. And what about looking for people and identifying people who potentially might be lonely around us? Maybe that elderly man, that elderly woman in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I have a friend who
yeah.
calls it the pastor of her neighborhood.
Mm,
She looks
mm,
around to see who's broken, who's hurting, what's my
mm,
responsibility, and it could be something really simple. I mean, we've read stories of people who were on their way to jump off of a bridge to commit suicide, and someone smiled at them, and they
wow.
felt like there are kind people in the world. It just broke them out of that, terrible, disruptive, dysfunctional mindset that
Mm,
they were in. And so it can be a very small act of kindness. It could be, and maybe you feel compelled to do something for your neighborhood. Maybe
yeah,
we have things called block parties in our neighborhoods in America, where maybe you're the one who organizes something where people just get together, and you have the local pub in
wow.
England, where people get
Yep.
together, right? I mean, just those kinds of
Mm,
cultural
mm,
pieces
mhm,
that help
mhm,
us to find a
mm,
place of connection. But I think we do have a responsibility to
yeah,
our fellow neighbors that are, for helping them with human flourishing. That's the
yeah,
the
yeah.
model of two are better than one. There may be a day when you need that help from
That
someone. So to
help.
be able to
Yeah.
pour in, to be able to give back, to be able to really
Mm,
open our eyes, get our eyes
mm,
off our
mhm,
phone, look around what's happening, have that discerning eye
yeah,
that
yeah.
sees something's off with this neighbor. I was
Mm,
driving by a neighbor's house one day, and I heard a car start and the garage door was closed. And I know there are a lot of teenagers in our neighborhood, and I thought, oh my gosh, this could be like somebody's turning his car on to commit suicide. So I went to the door and started knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell. And finally they did come to the door, and it was
it
not
wasn't.
as terrifyingly critical as we thought,
Thank
but
you.
it could
Yeah,
have been. And so,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
being ready, being alert, being aware of not
Mm,
just our
mm.
own lives, but of the lives of those around us. That's human
Wow.
responsibility,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, very absolutely, absolutely. And that's very alert of you. Thank you for being a great community, a great neighbor.
Thank
Now,
you.
so before we do, please share with us what you do, Chula Vista Christian University. Please share with us about your work there. You're the founder of that university, and yeah.
Thank you. Well, it
Mm,
started with Academic Rescue Mission, which is a a nonprofit I started years ago to help churches open their doors to homeschoolers. We talked about a little bit on the show, so academicrescuemission.com. And then I started a university on that model, a four-year university where we use the mentor model. It's debt-free. That doesn't often happen in the United States, debt-free private education. In fact, I don't know of anybody else who's debt-free. Education is expensive in the US. And so we do a mentor-driven model, practitioners that lead, and we actually welcome students from around the world in our online program. Online's not, you still need face-to-face mentors in your own country or neighborhood, but it is a supplement to what you're doing. And my latest book is Outsourced: Why America's Kids Need an Education Revolution. And then my next book that's coming out is The Bachelor Epidemic: Confronting the Rise of Artificial Attachment. So those are some of the works, but you can learn more at cvcu.us or academicrescuemission.com. And if you want to come book me to speak, drlisadunne.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we really, really appreciate your time for being with us today, Dr. Lisa. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. We wish you all the best in all your professional and personal endeavors. So thank you everybody for joining us today on this Global Village Media conversation. Dr. Lisa's insights have been grounding and practical. I think especially in the way that you've helped us see loneliness, not just as a feeling, but as a real biosocial signal that our bodies and communities are designed not for, basically. So to everyone listening in the UK and the US and beyond, thank you for spending this time with us. I think if anything has resonated today with you personally, I do want to encourage you to take one small step this week towards real life connection. Show up and allow yourself to be seen, allow yourself to be heard. Dr. Lisa, thank you once again. Before we close, please share with the folks one final word.
Thank you, Charles. This is such a powerful topic. I think a final word would just be that concept of assess and address. Somebody out there needs your connectivity, your skill set, your personality. You're going to be the one that helps them flourish in their lives. I think of all the mentors in my life who helped me to flourish. You could be that mentor for someone else.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Folks, this has been Charles Olorunfemi from Global Village Media. And until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your connections. And also remember that in a world where we can be anything we want to be, let's be kind to ourselves and be kind to others. Remain blessed.